As the population continues to grow, James City County strives to find the critical balance between preserving the past and planning for the future.
Well, I came here out of the military, 1956. When I finished high school, I went to North Carolina A&T, and I my field was vocational industrial education, and I majored in brickwork. And so I met my wife, this is her home here in Williamsburg. We met at A&T, and after we both graduated in 1952, we went to Washington, D.C., and worked for a couple of years. I got drafted in the military, so she was left there. And she didn't want to live in D.C. by herself, so she came back. And her father had a little small house beside his house, and she fixed it up. And when I came back out of the military, she had the house all set up. We've been here ever since. That was 1956.
We moved here in 1949. When our children were growing up, we didn't worry about them going up and playing by Route 60. And of course, if we had a nice dog, if they got too close to the little two-lane travel road, the dog would get between them and the road and push them back. So there's no problem there. You could drive to Williamsburg. At that time, you didn't see stoplights, you didn't see open fields being tended.
My name is Sandy Warner. I'm the current county administrator of James City County. And prior to arriving in James City County, I had spent a career in the United States Marine Corps as an infantry officer. When I arrived in November of '81 as the director of finance for the school system, the school population was pretty static. It wasn't until a couple of years later that I was part of a study on what was really happening in the locality. We were starting to see our first indications that growth was occurring. So from '81, you started to first get the glimpse. '82, '83, it really picked up. And in fact, a little comparison, when I arrived here in '81, there was not a traffic light at Mounts Bay Road, the entrance to the county complex and Kingsmill, on 199.
I arrived at a wonderfully interesting time. There was no government center. We rented our offices on Richmond Road in the city. We had no fire department or police department. We were served by a city of Williamsburg in certain portions with fire and recreation.
I was born in Stanley, North Dakota, a little town in North Dakota, in the northwest corner. Population 1,441 when I was there, and lived there for my first 18 years and had a wonderful time growing up. Snow is a lot better when you can throw it than when you have to shovel it, and I thought snow was wonderful. I taught the first year at the University of Nevada in Reno. I was there just a year, and then I got a call from the chairman of the government department at William & Mary, who said that it was looking for somebody. And at that time, it was purely an old boy network of hiring. Now you'd get cut off at the knees if you tried to do that. But I was hired by William & Mary as a result of phone calls and letters. I never set foot in the place.
When I came out of the military, I did brickwork, laid brick around Williamsburg, around Colonial Williamsburg, around town, for about 10 years. I was appointed in 60, and I think it's 69. And at my age, and I had a little trouble with dates. I think it's 69, yeah. And I served 14 years. I was appointed for 2 years and 4 elections, and I was successful. But I served 14 years on the board. Before all of the hustle and bustle that we have now, it was kind of a sleepy, quiet county. When I first went on board, we had no, as I said, fire department, no police department, and we had very few county staff people, just the 3.
I went on the Planning Commission 1 July 1956, and I stayed there until January of 1995. Well, it was sketchy to start with, and when it got into the 60s, into the first zoning is when the real flap started. And of course, I think they still exist to some point. I could say that from the time I went on it till today, year by year, things have gotten more involved and a lot more difficult at times. I think that actually too many people want too many things. And each one feels that, or not each one that comes before, but a lot of people come before the Planning Commission. They think they should be granted exceptions and this and that. And the same way with local government, Board of Supervisors. My thought is always that as long as we have the ordinances, you could go by them, make exceptions when they're warranted. And but the main thing is to treat everybody the same that comes before either of the bodies.
The beauty of the community started to attract people here, and as anything, if you like something, you're going to tell, that's my favorite expression, you're going to tell Aunt Jane and Uncle Henry to come to James City because it has all these things. They arrive, they then tell some friends, and the next thing they go, where all this traffic come from, where these traffic lights come from, and where all these shopping malls come from. Well, folks, they followed the population. And a lot of them come here because it's where they were on a class trip at one time in their life. It's where they might have honeymooned, and they recall that snapshot. So when they come here and the snapshot, the photo is no longer the same, they go, well, what happened to what we came here for? Well, you've changed it. You demanded a lot of what you had where you came from.
When I first got there, the county was buying some services from the city, but there was really no real assets in the county. We developed the Upper County Park, and then we did the Mid County Park and got that in place. And then you've mentioned the community center. That was the last kind of big project that I was involved in. We spent a lot of time designing what the pool would be. And the pool was going to be, first of all, accessible to handicapped. And it was going to recognize there was a lot of senior population. And so we wanted it to be shaped and organized in a way that you could have lessons and activities for older people, that you could have therapeutic kind of swimming. But we also made a really interesting policy decision. We said we would not have a diving section. We would not let the water be deep enough that community center could be where the AAU was having statewide meets, because we knew that with our location of the Williamsburg area, it would become the hot property across the state, and all the competitive swim teams would want to have everything there, and that would push out the community. And so we actually made a decision to in effect, prefer the community. So there were a lot of little decisions like that.
I made the silly decision that I was going to stop working for one of the largest companies in the country, General Electric, and come to Williamsburg. And I was the transit manager in a community that had no transit system, but had a grant of less than $300,000 to demonstrate that rural public transportation would work. And that $300,000 was to last for 3 years. Can't buy a bus today, by the way, for $300,000. But we ran a rural public transportation demonstration project, and quite frankly, it worked. Watt today is an outgrowth of James City County Transit, which began running in 1977. It was one of the more successful of the 147 and 140 some projects that the Federal Highway Administration funded they concluded that James City County was in the top 3 of all those demonstrations nationwide in terms of its ridership, its cost effectiveness, and this sort of thing.
In 1971, there was an election. I had not been involved in James City County government at all prior to the time I was elected to office. And in 1971, there was a gentleman who was the incumbent. He happened to be a Republican, and I was a Democrat. And we talked about who might run against him. And so eventually, it was sort of decided that I would run. I had a wife who was very much involved in the community. She had been head of the preschool. She had been very active in her church. She had been very active in a variety of ways. Lots of people knew her, but nobody knew me at all. But it was a 3-way race. The incumbent, another person who took, an old-time county resident who took a number of votes, I think, from him, and me. And with the help, I think, greatly of my wife. Many people, I think, said, well, we like her, and he probably can't be too bad if he's with her. So I managed to win this 3-way race, much to everyone's surprise, including mine. So I should say, in 1972, the county had really not a professional person in its employ. I'm not counting teachers who are professionals, but in the county itself, there was no planner, there was no CPA, there was no engineer, there was no anybody who worked for the county. And so beginning in 1973, we got a lawyer, and we got an engineer, and we got a community development person who were real professionals and committed to their field. And that's what made a difference.
I see a lot in the growth of people that's coming here. You know, this amazes me at the number of people and the number and how fast we're growing. I look at things like Newtown. It kind of get a little frightened sometimes looking at all the construction going on in one place. They're just building, I say, a town within it, you know, within James City County, all at one time. There's a large amount of construction going on. We're doing a gym. My son is doing a gym out there now. We just about complete the brickwork on it. But there's so much construction and it's going so fast. It's kind of frightening. I remember back when I was doing construction, it was, you know, it seemed to take forever to build a house and brick a house. Now they put them up so fast. And I wonder sometime about the, you know, the quality of them and the durability of them.
There are several places that I think in the county that should go on the National Historical Records. Among them is my wife's church, Olive Branch Church. Beautiful building, beautiful cemetery, beautiful yards. And it should be protected. And it appears that about the only way things can be protected there is to get them on a historical register.
The biggest investment has truly been in parks and recreation, greenways, the various trail component, and again, trying to serve the diverse needs of this community in parks and recreation has been a challenge, but we're doing it. We also charge fees to use a lot of our programs, and we're one of the few jurisdictions in the Commonwealth of Virginia that recovers a lot of the cost of recreation. We don't charge for parks. We charge for the programs and for the use of some of our facilities. But parks, you have the operational costs, but it's not a revenue generator. If we had not had these co-sponsored, and if we had not had the people who were willing to talk to government, I think that we would not have had the community support to move forward and expend the resources, the tax dollars, to again, you know, not only acquire the land, but then put the facilities in and then offer the programs. I mean, these programs are, you know, after a while, they are pretty expensive because, you know, you have the person who's teaching the course or the coaches or the liming. People think about all the things. You got to lime the field. You got to have referees. You need to have supplies, you need to have bus contracts if you're going to move people to a special feature, when you have the Easter egg hunts. And so, there's a lot of community partnerships, and I think that's one of the hallmark of the entire area, not only just in James City County. I think that's the greater Williamsburg area, that again, the community supports what they value, and they value recreation, they value athletics, they also value green. And that gets into the outdoor life we have with the Powhatan canoe launch for kayaking and canoeing, and the Riverfront Park for boat launching, and Little Creek Reservoir Park, partnership with Newport News, which owns it as a water supply for treated water, but they donated the land and almost $250,000 for us to develop that as our park up there, which is fishing and boating and barbecuing, and we added a new playground this year, so lots of partnerships.
There was a big effort on our part through the Service Authority to develop the water and the sewer systems, so again that we would be better positioned to handle the growth that we thought was coming. A lot of times growth kind of leapfrogs a community into some pretty dysfunctional kinds of land use patterns. And we wanted to use the utility systems to make our growth much more systemic and to take a lot of the bumps and out of it. And that was pretty much in place by the time I left.
So a professional staff was really the critical thing. And then with the professional staff eventually came some land use programs, some environmental programs, some parks and recreation programs, improvement of schools. There was a year, we were very fortunate because with Anheuser-Busch, there was a great increase in our revenue. And in 1974, I think it was, the increase in the budget for the schools was 32% in 1 year. People now would be horrified at that, I suppose. Well, people were horrified then, maybe. But the fact was the schools were not good. They needed help desperately. And we had this infusion of money from Anheuser-Busch and didn't yet have needs to spend it on buildings and so forth. And so we were able to spend some on the schools. It was an exciting time for me because the county was changing, and not simply in terms of more people moving and things like that, but it was going from a completely rural county to a, what would you call it, I guess a suburban county, and pretty soon here it's going to be even a little bit urban, but it's certainly suburban and very different.
In the early days, the buses pulled in the parking lot behind what was Rose's 5 and 10. Now I think it's Forbes Candy Shop, or I think it's that's still there, and some souvenir places. But the buses pulled back there, and I'd go back there to most of the time to check on the buses. Sometimes because when drivers were absent or for some other reasons, oftentimes I found myself driving that bus as well. But it was very motivating to see folk going to work who would not have been able to work otherwise without the transit system, or to see ladies, many of whom I've known most of my life, who were domestics and who were making 14, 15, less than 20 bucks per day as a domestic, and then spending 12, 13 of that on taxi cab and before James City County Transit. So we made a significant impact on the life of some folk in this community as a result of James City County Transit. And one of the things I'm proudest of in my career.
All the controversy about develop here or develop that way, is it going, we've got to remember there are certain things as property rights also. Just one example, and it's not specific for people, of course I know the people, but you could take two people, two farmers, that labored their entire life on a farm, and both of them in their getting up in age, and an arbitrary line drawn where we can get sewer and water. This farmer can sell his farm to a developer and retire a millionaire. the man right across the road from him because he's not in the right area. An arbitrary line has been drawn, and he's got to die still working if he's able to. And right or wrong, I'm not commenting on that. There's got to be some restrictions. But I think you've also got to take consideration property rights.
As traffic builds up, whether it's James City County or the city of Williamsburg or York County, you know, you got to massage where it's going to go. So growth is going to continue. For the foreseeable future, we're going to have water for both current and future needs. Now, the water issue is a major issue in Virginia. And one of the ironic things is we have two rivers that surround us, and then there's, of course, is the ocean, but you cannot use the James south of Richmond. You can't use the York. There isn't a power source available to desalt it and then get rid of the byproduct, what's called the brine. You know, otherwise you're going to have coal burning, or you got to use nuclear power, and that creates another whole set of environmental issues. So the answer in the short thing is we have water now, we're going to have water for the future, but way out there, the state has to take an active role to get into water planning for the entire Commonwealth.
Right at the front end of the modern development of James City, there was this human equation that was put together so that there were thoughts about how do we build an economically diverse population. We did a couple of projects that, again, today this is kind of common, but was not in those days, where there was an apartment project that was done off Ironbound, and we worked with the developer so that there were some Section 8 units in that project. It was something like 100, maybe 200 units, and maybe 10% or 20% were Section 8, but you couldn't tell. And that was the beauty of it, that we started going to economic integration a whole lot earlier than a lot of other communities.
And so we had hearings around the county about a proposed plan. That no comprehensive plan, of course, has teeth in it. It's not a law. It is only a plan, but it tells you something about what people intend to do anyhow. And many people in the county were horrified. My home is my castle, my property is my own, all those kinds of things. They were horrified. And then we tried to change the zoning laws to make them conform a little bit with, consistent with the comprehensive plan. And we increased, for example, we increased the amount of acreage that you need in the rural area to have a home site. We decreased the amount of land that you needed in some areas in residential areas near the city. The notion was that density should be higher near Williamsburg and should be lower further out, the primary service area. And it was fairly tough going, but I have to say that the people on the board were pretty supportive of it. Some didn't like it at all and voted against it, but they were fairly supportive, and nobody ever tried to undercut it.
In the 80s, we developed an organization called Neighborhood Connections, the neighborhood's office within the county. And it really was a realization that if we're going to grow, quote unquote, grow the county, we had, and that the county certainly was changing, but we certainly had a commitment to maintaining the character of its communities. So we did do a lot of work in terms of building communities, trying to help them to maintain their character, and at the same time, trying to encourage people to come together and learn from each other.
I'm optimistic about the county's future. They have the problems, as you can see in the papers every day. You can see if you watch the Board of Supervisors meetings or Planning Commission meetings. It looks as if everybody's throat, but it's all going to work out. And there's going to be a James City County here long after all the people here are gone.
I think the county of James City to my limited understanding of the entire Commonwealth, is the community I think has most handled the balance of economic opportunity and social opportunity, and has had a good sense of equity and a good sense of fairness to its population. I think the development patterns of James City are better than any growth community that I'm aware of. I think the scale that has resulted is testimony to the livability and the sustainability. And so as I see places like Newtown coming along, I just think there continues to be the building of a very special place.
How we came to have a recreation center. Initially, that was in good part due to Jim Oliver, who said we should have a recreation center. And some members of our board said, recreation center? I've never had a single constituent say we need a recreation center. And Jim said, well, that's because you don't have one, they've never seen one, they don't know what they're missing. But I promise you, they'll like it when they get it. It's something we should have. So we held a referendum on borrowing funds for a recreation center in whenever, 1978 or 79, I don't know. And we talked about when to have the referendum, and we decided to hold it on in February, what we hoped would be a snowy day in February. But in any event, the percentage of people who voted in the county was very low. I think it was 16 or 17% of the registered voters. And it was narrowly defeated. And we went back to the drawing board. We got $250,000 from Anheuser, a gift from Anheuser-Busch. We scaled down the size of the project. We had some additional revenues that we did not expect to get. We did all those things with the result that we could build the recreation center without borrowing any money. And that's what we did. This will be a good community, I think, for a long time. Unless people get too excited about saving money or whatever, but I don't think so. I think there'll be enough pressure in the community to have good schools, which are the key to much, and good social services, good human services, good recreation services.
The community itself and the leadership of the community had the vision and the reality of knowing that they had to change the way they were managing and governing the community. So government in James City County, to some degree, was reinvented in the context of the in the 1970s. We had a blessed opportunity to help to shape the culture of a community and an organization. So we didn't just evolve. In some ways, we were able to plan that development. And I think that's why we have a transit system, and where most communities our size don't. Why we have a human services function that is more holistic, if you will, than most communities our size. But I do believe that the challenge before us as a community, just like the challenge before us as a state, is how do we deal with this continuing problems of haves and have-nots? It is incredibly difficult for young people, folk in the service industry, police officers or social workers, to make the kind of living that is required to live here and raise a family here. And that's not a new revelation. We've been trying to struggle with that problem, that issue for a long time. And it's not unique to James City County. But I would say to you, and this is something that I've been saying for a long time, if we can't solve it here, it's probably not going to get solved, because there are more resources, more human capital, there more commitment and will, I think, in a lot of ways, to deal with some of these issues here in the historic triangle.